Hello everyone. Tonight, I've got a batch of chilling tales to share with you. But before we dive in, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me keep creating even better content. Now, sit back, relax, and join me as we embark on this eerie journey together. I never believed in ghosts until the night I was stocking shelves at the 24-hour pharmacy on Elm Street. My name is Martin, and I worked the graveyard shift to pay off student loans. It was always quiet, the hum of the fluorescent lights, the distant hiss of the refrigerator units, the faint plink of the security camera motors sweeping the ceiling. Nothing ever happened. Until November. I arrived at midnight and clocked in, greeting the empty store with a polite good evening that echoed down the aisles. I began my rounds, vitamin section, cold remedies, cosmetics. My phone buzzed with boredom, an old playlist, nothing new. Around 200 a.m., I noticed aisle 7. The one with pain relievers and antacids looked odd. A box of Pepto-Bismol was on the floor, lid snapped open, pills spilled like fallen teeth. Puzzled, I crouched to scoop them up. That's when I heard a soft rustle, like someone rifling through the shelves behind me. No footsteps, no breathing, just the plastic clatter of products shifting. I held my breath, pressed my back to the shelf of cough syrups, and peered around. Nothing. The aisle was empty. My pulse hammered so hard it felt like someone else's heart. "Hello," I called, voice brittle. Silence answered, as though the store had never heard me speak. Squaring my shoulders, I straightened and continued cleaning, but the hair at my nape prickled. I blamed the draft from the exit door and kept stocking. A half hour later, I was arranging boxes of surgical masks when I felt a pressure behind me, like someone standing too close. I turned. The aisle was dark. The overhead light flickered and died, bathing me in murky shadows. I tapped my flashlight app, but the screen glowed weakly before cutting out. Panic surged. I spun toward the exit, but the lights flickered back, only to reveal in the shadows at the far end a shape, a gaunt figure, hunched, long hair obscuring its face, clinging to the shelves with spindly fingers. My scream caught in my throat. I blinked, and it was gone. The aisle end was empty again. I backed away, heart pounding. Rational thought told me it was a trick of the flickering light. I hurried to the service desk and grabbed the handheld radio. "Chris, are you there? I need a hand with the no response." I pounded the call button. Static. The world outside was dark silent. Determined to finish the shift, I switched floors, cold room. The door hissed as I entered the sub-zero chamber. I was bent to grab a case of cough drops when I heard, clear as a bell, "Martin." The voice was a whisper, hollow, like wind across a tombstone. I straightened, shivering, blood ice cold in my veins. "Who's there?" I rasped. The hum of the compressor filled the space. The only answer was my own ragged breathing crystallizing in the cold air. I grabbed the case and fumbled for the door, but the handle froze under my gloves. The voice came again, closer, just behind me. "Martin." My breath hitched. I yanked my hand across the frosted metal bar. I felt something brush my glove, cold as death. I ripped the glove off and yanked the door free. The compressor snapped off, plunging the chamber into an abyss of darkness. I scrambled into the fluorescent glare of the main floor, gasping as the door sealed itself. I dropped the case stumbled back toward aisle 7. The floor was littered with pills again this time, tablets from every shelf. A devastated storm of plastic shells and bitter medicine, and in the mess writhed a form, the gaunt figure convulsing its hair, whipping around as though caught in a phantom wind. It crawled along the floor toward me, limbs bent at impossible angles. A hollow whisper rose, a chorus of unseen voices. "Don't leave us. Don't leave us." My legs went rubbery. I turned and ran, heedless of the precarious boxes lining the aisles. I crashed into the automatic doors. The sensors didn't detect me. They stayed shut. Above the security camera, motors screeched, pointing at me, but the monitors in the office showed only static. The whisper followed me through the store, through every aisle, seeping through the walls, trailing me like black smoke. I reached the freezer units by the preparation counter and collapsed against the cool glass. Buttons on the ice machine blinked, and suddenly, icy breath exhaled from the vents, fogging the glass with scrawled letters, "Stay." My phone sprang to life, 5 missed calls, all from unknown. I answered, voice cracking. A single breath on the line, then a click. The lights flickered as though someone dropped a switch. In that final flash, I saw them, dozens of pale figures, half buried behind the shelves, eyes hollow, mouths open in silent screams. They pressed against the plastic, their long, bony fingers banging against the walls. I vomited, crawling backward, until click, the power came back fully. The figures were gone. The pills were gone. Only the quiet hum remained. I fled before dawn's first light. The manager found me, shivering in my car, tears frozen on my cheeks. I quit that night, but I still dream of those hollow eyes, those whispering voices begging me to stay. Some part of me wonders if they'll let me go next time. I never meant to become a hero. I just wanted to pay my rent. My name is Elena, and I was a registered nurse at St. Gideon's Hospital, working the overnight shift in the general ward. It was March, just before spring break, when the new patient arrived, Mr. Graves in room 314, admitted for pneumonia. He was old, thin as a scarecrow, and he smelled of mothballs. The doctor assured me he was stable, but told me to keep an extra eye on him. I should have known better. My first night with him was routine. Administer the nebulizer treatments, take his vitals chart, everything. But at 2:17 a.m., the telemetry alarm blinked silently on the monitor. His oxygen saturation dipped to 82. I rushed in, mask dangling at my neck, and found him propped up on the pillows, staring at the ceiling. His face was ashen, but his eyes were bright, too bright. I adjusted his mask and repositioned his tubing. When I touched his shoulder, he muttered, "They're waiting." I frowned. "Who's waiting, Mr. Graves?" He turned his head slowly, eyes piercing the dim light. "The watchers." I patted his hand. "It's the medicine." "You're sick. Try to rest." He closed his eyes, but his lips twitched in a wry smile. "You can't stop them." I chalked it up to delirium. The rest of the night passed uneventfully until the 3:45 a.m. rounds. I carried his meds in a white plastic cup, 2 Percocet for pain, 1 Ativan for anxiety. I knocked and entered. The room was colder than the corridor. The thermostat read 63 degrees, despite the heater's chipper hum down the hall. My breath fogged in the still air. Mr. Graves was gone. Panic swirled in my chest. I flicked on the lamp. Empty bed. The window drapes fluttered, though I hadn't touched them. I checked the call button. It was lit, but when I pressed, nothing happened. The phone line was dead. I scanned the bathroom door closed. I flipped it open. Empty. Storage closet. Empty. I approached the window. Below the courtyard was deserted, lit only by sodium lamps that cast everything orange. No sign of him. I radioed security. Room 314, patient missing. Please send someone. On it replied the guard voice, tinny over the radio. I waited, heart thudding. That's when I heard it, a soft tapping like fingernails against glass. The window beside the bed rattled. I spun around. A pale face stared in from outside. The features were indistinct, like a mask carved from white porcelain eye sockets, empty mouth twisted into a grin. I stumbled backward as the face pressed against the glass forehead first, until the pain bowed inward slightly. I screamed. The face disappeared. The drapes stilled. The tapping ceased. Footsteps thundered in the hallway. Security burst in flashlight sweeping. "Where is he?" I gasped. They found nothing in the courtyard. No footprints in the gravel. No open window. No sign of exit. The door to 314 was locked from the inside. We never found where Mr. Graves went. The doctors marked him as eloped, a euphemism I would come to hate. The next night, I was summoned back to 314. They had me working extra just to keep the numbers stable. The ward felt emptier, now ghostly. I kept turning, expecting him to lurk behind the curtains. At 1:02 a.m., I heard the tapping again. 3 soft knocks, wood on wood, coming from inside the locked linen cart in the hallway. I cursed under my breath and unlocked it. Inside lay folded sheets and stacks of gowns, and a patient wristband for Mr. Graves. My fingertips tingled as I traced the letters. Last name Graves, first name Ephraim, birth date 11/02/1923. My blood ran cold. I slammed the cart door and bolted toward the nurse's station. The lights flickered. A drawer sprang open, spilling scissors and tongue depressors across the floor. In the chaos, a page printed itself on the station printer. Elena James, RN. Welcome. Beneath, in shaky type, stay with him. My hands shook. The hospital suddenly felt too small. I moved away, chest tight, and texted my colleague, Mia, cover 314, please. Something weird is happening. No response. I forced myself back down the hall. Room 314's door was ajar. I shoved it open. Inside was Mr. Graves, seated upright on the bed. Though his chart showed he had no IV line, no oxygen cannula. He wore hospital pajamas that looked decades old, pinned with rusted safety pins. His hair was white and wispy like a halo. But the worst was his eyes, black as oil, reflecting the ceiling lights. He smiled. "Elena," I froze. "Mr. Graves, you can't be here." He patted the bed. "I've been here all along," I swallowed. "You disappeared." He chuckled, a dry, crackling sound. "No, Elena. I've never left the ward." My blood turned to ice. "What do you want from me?" He leaned forward. "Your vigil. Stay by my side, Elena. Watch with me." He lifted a bony finger and tapped his temple twice. The lights dimmed. A chorus of whispering voices filled the room, droning urgent. I backed away. Sheets fluttered off the bed, twisting and writhing as though alive. Shadows on the wall grew long and thin, stretching toward me like black fingers. I stumbled out, slamming the door. The handle rattled as something pounded on the other side, desperate. I ran to the stairwell, 1 flight, 2 flights, and shoved the door open onto the rooftop. Cold wind rushed in scattering leaves. I looked back. Every window on the upper floor had a figure behind it, sleeping patience, or so it seemed, until all their heads turned to look directly at me. Mouths, stretching eyes hollow. I fled down the fire escape, feet pounding the metal rungs, adrenaline pumping. At ground level, the night was still. Security guards patrolled, oblivious. I reached my car with shaking hands, threw the door open, and tore away, tires screaming. That was 3 weeks ago. I quit the hospital yesterday. I left behind my badge, my scrubs, the nightmares, but I can't leave the echoes. Sometimes at night, I think I hear tapping on my window. I look, and for a heartbeat, I see a face pressed against the glass, pale porcelain eyes empty. Then the tapping stops, and I'm alone again, wondering if somewhere in that ward, someone Mr. Graves still needs a vigil, still needs me to stay. But I won't. Not again. I thought the surveillance room would be the safest station in the building. My name is Javier, and for the past 6 months, I've been the lone overnight security guard at the abandoned Crestwood Mall, keeping the cameras rolling in case of break-ins or vandals. It was a dead job, lights off, doors locked. Nothing moved except the HVAC, perfect for a college student moonlighting. But the mall had secrets, and on March 8th, I discovered them. That night, I arrived at 11:45 p.m., coffee in hand, and punched in. I settled into the swivel chair and flipped on the monitors, food court, arcade, cinema, entrance, barbershop. Silent, empty. I sipped the coffee, adjusted the infrared night vision on camera 12, the escalator bank, and checked my phone for messages. Nothing but spam. At midnight, the clock ticked over, and I switched to the main hallway cameras. They glowed green in the dim room. Then camera 04. The children's play area flickered. I paused, leaning forward. For a single frame, a small boy stood under the plastic slide, face turned away, shoulders shaking like he was crying. Then the frame snapped back to emptiness. My breath caught. I rewound the feed. 2 minutes, watch frame by frame, nothing. The slide was empty, the floor clean. I rubbed my eyes, convinced it was a glitch. Around 1:20 a.m., I heard it faint scratching like fingernails on metal. I muted the TV behind me and listened. The sound came from the hallway outside the control room. I glanced at the door camera, no movement. I pressed the intercom button. "Mall security all good here," I said, voice steady. Silence. I sighed, leaned back, and resumed my rounds. But then the lights on camera 07. The elevator lobby dimmed, and the status indicator changed from active to offline. I clicked the reset icon. The screen went black, then returned, showing only darkness. Even infrared failed. I toggled the feed again, static. My pulse quickened. I opened the security panel and noted the loss of signal. No power surge notifications. Just gone. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped from the room, locking the control room door behind me. The hallway lights were low, a dull amber glow, casting long shadows. I headed toward the elevator lobby to inspect the cameras physically. At the lobby, the elevator doors were shut. I tapped the call button, nothing. The camera above the bank stood silent, lens dull. I circled it, running my gloved finger along the casing. No loose wires. Then a soft whimper reverberated through the empty elevator shaft like a child crying. My hand froze on the camera. I shone the flashlight down the shaft. In the faint gloom, I saw a small shape at the bottom, dark hunched. A low sob rose, then a scraping shuffle, as though something dragged itself along the floor. My stomach clenched. "Hello," I called. "Who's there?" Silence fell. I pressed the intercom. Static. My phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. "Don't leave him." My hairs stood on end. I pocketed the phone and backed away, heart hammering. I hurried back to the surveillance room. Once inside, I locked the door and wiped sweat from my brow. The elevator cameras were still offline. Camera 04 was flickering again. I zoomed in on the play area. The slide looked pristine, but beneath it was a dark puddle that hadn't been there before. I froze with the cursor over the puddle. Then, for a heartbeat, something moved. In that puddle, a tiny hand reached up and disappeared. The feed snapped back to normal. I shut the monitor off. I downed the rest of the coffee, hands trembling. I needed to finish my shift, but I refused to go back out alone. I pressed the radio. "Dispatch security check." "No, I need backup." "Do you copy?" Nothing. No response on any channel. I realized I was entirely isolated. At 2:47 a.m., I heard the buzzer outside the main entrance. The double doors rattled metal against glass. Someone was trying to get in. I gripped my flashlight and eased the control room door open. The lobby beyond was empty. I walked toward the entrance, muffling my footsteps to avoid detection. Through the glass, I saw two small footprints in the dust on the floor. Bare feet spaced a foot apart like a child's. They stopped dead center beneath the security camera. I shone the flashlight on the prints. They glowed pale. There were no other marks. I shivered. It hadn't rained. Dust would have covered any prints long ago. I lifted my radio. I see footprints by the door. No sign of... Never mind. The radio crackled to life. 2 words warped. "Upstairs. Hurry." The voice warped like a phonograph winding down. My heart seized. I should have turned around, returned to the office. But something compelled me. What about the figure in the elevator shaft? The boy asking for help. Reluctantly, I followed the voice's direction back down the hall toward the old wing where the escalators used to be. The escalator area was a frozen time capsule. Broken treads, rusted handrails, walls scrawled with graffiti. I clicked the flashlight around. At the top of the escalator, a doorway led to a maintenance corridor I'd never used. The radio buzzed again. "He's waiting." I edged through the doorway. The corridor was narrow, overhead lights dead. I switched to the infrared setting on my flashlight. The beam washed the walls in sickly green. I scanned until I spotted footprints, small, bare like the ones at the entrance heading down the hall. My stomach lurched. I followed. At the end of the corridor, a service door hung ajar. I pushed it open. Inside was a child's bedroom. Pink wallpaper, peeling a crib in the corner, a mobile spinning silently. My mouth went dry. The city had no children's ward here. A framed photo on a dresser, a small boy no older than 5 eyes wide with a grin. On the back, in faded ink, Michael, 1992-1993. I realized with a jolt this mall was built on land where there had once been a daycare center. I remembered rumors of a fire the children trapped inside when staff failed to evacuate them. It had been hushed, replaced by the mall's opening. A soft cough echoed from the crib. My flashlight wavered. In its dim beam, a pair of tiny lips parted. The boy crawled out, pallid skin eyes, black as spilled ink pajamas stained with soot. He raised one finger to his lips, then pointed behind me. I spun. In the doorway stood the gaunt shape of another child, another boy, another set of soot-marked pajamas. Dozens of children filled the corridor, their faces masks of ash and pleading. Their hands reached out. I turned back. The boy in front crawled closer, voice a rasp. "Watch with us." I dropped the flashlight and bolted. The corridor behind me lengthened impossibly, walls stretching as though alive. Their whispers chased me, soft, insistent. "Stay, stay." I reached the escalator and leapt down, scrambling on the treads, tumbling to the bottom. I darted across the mall floor, adrenaline propelling me. I reached the main doors, they flew open. I burst into the cold night, sprinted to my car, and locked the doors. From the safety of the driver's seat, I dared to look back inside. Through the glass, I saw them, dozens of pale children, peering out, faces pressed to the windows, hands smearing the glass. They tilted their heads in unison, lips moving. "Stay, watch." I slammed the door shut and drove away, leaving their wails echoing in the empty lot. I quit the next morning. I still have the footage, ghostly figures hanging from the walls of that corridor. I've never shared it. No one would believe me. But sometimes in my dreams, I'm back in that surveillance room, the monitors blinking, and I see them watching. Always watching, waiting for me to return. I never imagined I'd find normalcy among the dead. My name is Marcus, and I work the night shift as a mortuary technician at Hollow Creek Funeral Home. It was an easy gig, low pay but peaceful. The families came and went during the day, and by 10:30 p.m., the place was mine. I prepped bodies for viewing, cataloged paperwork, and ran the embalming machines. Quiet work for a restless soul. I didn't believe in hauntings until I heard the whispers. It began the third week I worked there in late October. The old building, Victorian brick and wrought iron, loomed behind a high iron fence. The front door had a heavy bell that never rang at night. The back door, the one I used, hissed open on a hydraulic closer. I always switched on the overhead fluorescents in the preparation room. Then the corridor lights, making my way past rows of metal drawers labeled 00050. No one was ever around. That night, I just finished injecting cavity fluid into case 024, a man who'd passed from complications of diabetes. I stacked his personal effects glasses, wallet, watch on the back counter, then washed my hands. The hydrolab door stood slightly ajar. I pushed it closed, and that's when I heard it, a faint hiss like air escaping a tire. I froze mid-step, listening. The mortuary was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator units that kept the drawers cold. The hiss came again, low and urgent, seeming to originate from the corpse's storage wall. I shrugged and chalked it up to contraction in the pipes. I flicked off the prep room light and padded down the corridor to the break room. The coffee pot gurgled happily. I poured a fresh cup, eyes flicking to the window that overlooked the chapel. Moonlight painted geometric patterns on the dusty pews. I sipped the bitter brew, hoping to shake the cold prickle on my neck. At 1:02 a.m. the whispers began. They were soft, at first indistinct, like wind through a cracked window. I set my cup down and pressed a hand to the wall. Heart thudding, I tilted my head. Swish, swish. The sound moved faster now, sliding along the plaster above me. I followed its path to the prep room door. My breath caught as I realized the drawers behind that door, their cold steel faces, were whispering. I swallowed hard, my Adam's apple jutting out. "Hello," I rasped, voice echoing. Silence. I gripped the coffee cup as though it were a lifeline. The whispers resumed louder, urgent syllables. I couldn't decipher, but unmistakably voices. I forced myself to step forward and turned the knob of the prep room door. It swung open smoothly. The overhead light flickered on. Metal drawers lined either side. I approached the row holding case 031, an elderly woman from the Alzheimer's ward. Her name, Mrs. Lorraine Davies, was etched on a metal plate. The whispers seemed to emanate from that drawer. I hesitated, then knelt and grasped the handle. It was icier than ice frost forming on my fingertips. My heart pounded so loud, I feared it would shatter the silence. I yanked it open. Inside lay a dark void. The body had been removed for embalming hours ago, nothing but an empty cavity. And from within a single, crackling whisper. "Marcus?" My spine froze. I slammed the drawer shut, jolting on my knees. Another whisper this time, multiple voices, overlapping frantic. "Help us. Free us." I stood wiping sweat from my brow. This is absurd," I muttered. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from my roommate, reminding me to pick up groceries tomorrow. The normalcy of it made me flush with anger at myself for being spooked. I pocketed it and strode toward the embalming room. The embalming room was behind a reinforced steel door. I turned the handle. It swung open into pitch black. I slammed both hands against the wall-mounted light switch. Nothing. The darkness pressed in. I flicked on my phone's flashlight. A narrow beam cut through the gloom. In the center of the room sat the embalming table, stainless steel, gleaming dully. Beneath it, the drain grate hummed with circulating coolant. I exhaled, urging calm. Yet the whispers had enveloped me, echoing, insistent. I felt a tug on my pants leg. I looked down. Nothing. My flashlight trembled in my hand. I took a step forward and slipped on something wet. Spreading arms to catch myself, I looked down a puddle of thick, dark fluid. Blood. Not fresh, stale, coagulated, seeping from under the table. My pulse spiked. I knelt to examine droplets traced along the floor tiles in a neat line, as though someone had dragged something heavy. The fluid led to the wall, where a small panel sat slightly ajar. The whispers roared, now deafening. I forced myself to reach out and pry open the panel. Inside was a tangle of wires and tubes. One tube disconnected, oozed the dark fluid, like lifeblood from a corpse. I recoiled, heart racing. The whispers focused now into a word, repeating, "Open. Us." I slammed the panel shut and bolted for the prep room door, but it wouldn't budge. I yanked at the handle, panic rising. The whispers crescendoed into screams, rattling the steel around me. The lights overhead flickered and blazed, then died, plunging me into absolute black. I fumbled for my phone, flicked on the flashlight beam. It illuminated acres of darkness, but in that beam across the far wall appeared dozens of pale hands pressed against the glass of the mortuary drawers. Their owners, faces, gaunt eyes, sunken, hovered just behind the steel. Mouths gaping in silent screams. They tapped on the metal, parchment-thin fingers, drumming out a frantic rhythm. I stumbled back against the counter, breath ragged. The drawers all around me began to creak. One by one, they slid open on their own, though none held bodies. I heard a cacophony of metallic groans as each drawer revealed its emptiness, and from each cavity came the same chilling whisper, "Open us." I slammed my phone against my palm in desperation, and the flashlight flickered. The hands disappeared. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the light sputtered back on. I was alone in the room. The drawers were closed. No puddles, no blood. Just an immaculate white floor. My mouth went dry. I staggered to the prep room door, and to my relief, it swung open. I bolted down the corridor, past the rows of silent drawers, past the break room where my cold coffee sat untouched. I didn't stop until I reached the front lobby where the sleep-deprived receptionist Marjorie was dozing in her chair. She stirred. "Marcus, you okay?" I shook my head, words tangled in my throat. She yawned and pointed at the time clock, 3:45 a.m., almost over. I blurted, Did you hear?" Voices upstairs. Her eyes narrowed. "You're losing it, kid. You've been working too many doubles." I wanted to argue, to show her the blood or the hands, but nothing remained of it. I grabbed my bag and left without a backward glance. I quit the very next night. I drove away as the sunrise turned the brick facade pink. Only later did I learn the mortuary's morgue had once been a mental asylum wing where patients were left to die chained to their beds. Their bodies were never claimed. The drawers in the funeral home were built from the same steel repurposed. Now sometimes at home late at night, I hear whispers through my apartment walls. "Marcus, open us." I don't answer. I plug my ears. I pray they never follow me here, because I know they're still waiting, and one day they'll find a way to open the drawers themselves. I never imagined that my research would invite something inhuman. My name is Dr. Priya Malhotra, and I volunteered for the overnight shift in the Behavioral Neurobiology Lab at St. Augustine Research Institute to monitor a critical and highly classified experiment. We're studying fear responses in rodents using an advanced virtual reality chamber that simulated predator presence. The rodents wore tiny headsets and navigated mazes while we recorded neural activity. Our lead researcher, Dr. Whitcomb, called it the next frontier in understanding trauma. I called it my ticket to tenure. I should have known ambition carries a price. It was late April. The lab was buried in the bowels of the old hospital wing, long windowless corridors that smelled of antiseptic and damp concrete. I arrived at 10:45 p.m., logged in with my thumbprint, and the door hissed open. Inside the VR chamber glowed with a pale blue light. A single rat subject, R27A albino we'd nicknamed Snowball, waited in the holding cage, twitching its whiskers. Its neural implant glowed faintly under the hairless scalp. I checked the data console. The previous night's run had been aborted. Snowball froze in the maze's entrance and refused to move. The log noted elevated theta wave activity during the predator hologram sequence. Dr. Whitcomb had ordered me to repeat the trial until Snowball completed the course. Data is data, he'd said. No shortcuts. At midnight, I prepped the chamber. I placed Snowball in the VR arena a plexiglass box lined with infrared sensors. I activated the treadmill floor and closed the soundproof door. The ambient speakers hissed on, delivering the soft hum of the windswept savannah. I dimmed the overhead lights and monitored the neural readouts on the console. Snowball hesitated at the maze's entrance. Its tiny heart rate spike glowed red on the screen. The predator sequence began. The holographic lion emerged, shifting from a phantom silhouette to a flesh and fur projection snarling with glowing teeth. Snowball bolted forward, whiskers flattened and squeaked. Its neural patterns surged spikes in the amygdala, disrupted hippocampal rhythms. I frowned. This was normal, up to a point. Snowball froze again at the second turn. The lion prowled closer. The rat's neural implant buzzed. Then a surge of white noise flooded the speakers, drowning the simulation. The lion vanished. Snowball cowered in the corner, whiskers trembling. My hands flew to the console controls, but the system was unresponsive. The digital readouts all glitched, the lines bending into fractals. I hit the emergency abort, but nothing happened. The door lock indicator stayed red. The lights snapped off. The only illumination was Snowball's implant, pulsing red like a malignant eye. The chamber speaker crackled, then whispered, "Find me." I staggered back. Dr. Whitcomb. I pounded the intercom. No response. My phone, dead. The lab's emergency lights kicked in, casting long, quivering shadows on the walls. I edged forward, heart hammering. Snowball's implant shut off. The rat disappeared into the shadow under the ramp of the maze wall. A soft scratching echoed from within. I steeled myself and peered through the chamber window. In the hazy glow of the emergency lights, I saw it not the rat, but a tall, gaunt silhouette, its fur-matted eyes glowing like ember's muzzle, elongated beyond any rat's proportions. My breath seized. The creature tilted its head, beady eyes locking onto mine. Its whiskers bristled, and it spoke, no rasped, in a voice like gravel crumbling. "Find me." Panicked, I stumbled back, knocked into the console. Sparks flew as my elbow caught a power switch. The chamber doors groaned open. The creature emerged, twitching on its hind legs like a caricature of a rat. Its implant port, designed only for rodents, hung from its skull like broken wires. It took a step toward me, and the emergency lights flickered. I bolted out of the room, hitting the hallway lights as I passed. The corridor was empty, silent, except for my ragged breathing. I sprinted toward the control room, intending to cut power to the entire lab. Footsteps clattered behind me, rapid skittering steps echoing in the concrete tunnel. Dr. Malhotra. A voice called too deep to be a rat's. "Help me." I whirled. The creature skidded into view, impossibly fast, its hind legs bending like a man's knees. Its eyes glowed with desperation. "Dr. Whitcomb, trapped. Find me," it rasped. My mind reeled. "You're a rat," I stammered. It shook its head. "No, not a rat. Something. Borrowed flesh." "Find door." Behind it, the lab door swung shut. The corridor lights died, plunging me into darkness. I fumbled for my phone, still dead. The creature hissed, advancing. My back hit a wall. I spotted an access panel near the floor. With trembling fingers, I pried it open, exposing a tangle of electrical conduits. The creature lunged. I yanked free a thick cable metal sheath and copper coils gleaming. With all my strength, I swung it like an improvised club. The creature screeched, an unholy blend of rodent squeal and human groan as the cable struck its head. It shattered the silence, and a fountain of sparks erupted from its implanted port. It collapsed in a heap, twitching, clawing at its shredded flesh. I dropped the cable and scrambled past it to the lab door. It resisted until I tugged again, breaking the lock mechanism. I flung it open and dashed into the control room. My fingers moved on autopilot cutting breakers, powering down the VR rigs, lighting the building into darkness. The lab fell silent. The creature's screech echoed once, then ceased. I sank to the floor, chest heaving. Lights flickered back on in the corridor. I limped back to the VR chamber. The glass was intact but empty. No rat, no creature, nothing. Only a smear of blood and a few blackened wires on the floor. Dr. Whitcomb never learned what happened that night. I never mentioned the creature. The experiment was declared a failure. Snowball was euthanized for unexplained neural pathology. I transferred to another lab, claiming burnout. But sometimes I wake at night, heart pounding, and I swear I hear a faint scratching outside my door. Tiny toenails on wood. A whisper. Find me, I don't answer. I know that whatever I release the hedge between human and animal, shattered some part of it still drifts looking for me. And one day, it will find me. I picked up the night shift at Hugo's Gas and Go to cover for a coworker on maternity leave. My name is Devin, and I figured it would be easy money, just cash register restocking snacks and making coffee for the occasional trucker who rolled in at 3:00 a.m. But on my first full moon shift, I learned that some reflections aren't meant to be seen. I arrived at 10:30 p.m., turned on the lights, and flipped the open sign. Business was as sparse as expected. 2 soda machines humming, the deli case empty except for day-old sandwiches and aisles dusty. The bathroom stood at the back, a single unisex stall, and a row of sinks beneath a long mirror. I kept it locked, no shoplifters in there at night, but I still checked in every hour. At 1:15 a.m., I heard the door chime. The sound seemed fed through a distorted megaphone. A man entered, boots thudding, and asked for hot water. His face was half-shadowed beneath his hood. I handed him a styrofoam cup and returned to my magazine. He took the water, nodded, and left without a word. At 2:47 a.m., exactly when the moon would crest the gas station canopy, the door chime rang again. This time, no one was visible. I looked up. The lot was empty. I sighed, chalked it up to an errant breeze, and made coffee. At 3:11 a.m., I called my mother. She always worried about me working nights. My voice was tight. "Yeah, Mom, I'm fine. No one's here." I hung up when I heard the chime behind me. 3 times. I spun, no customers. My pulse thundered. I locked the door and walked to the restroom. I knocked on the exterior latch. Just checking all good. No reply. I stepped inside, flicked on the fluorescent light. It buzzed. But the mirror at the sinks was different. My reflection looked the same at first. Fatigued eyes, a 5 o'clock shadow-stained polo shirt. But then I saw it, something moving behind me in the glass. A blurred shape, like a person rushing past, yet, when I turned, nothing. I wiped steam from the mirror. No condensation, but the trailing shape lingered. A litany of goosebumps rose on my arms. I leaned closer. On the right edge, A pale face emerged, not my own. Hollow eyes, lips stretched in a silent scream. I jerked back my heart in my throat. When I looked again, it was gone. I slammed the restroom door and backed away. My reflection remained alone in the glass. I stared for a moment, breathing hard, then yanked the door open and fled to the counter. My coffee trembled in its cup holder. The clock on the register read 3:15. 4 minutes until my break ended. I forced myself to calm down. It must have been my imagination. The flicker of fluorescent lights, lack of sleep. I poured the rest of my coffee and watched the lot through the plate glass windows. Familiar nothingness. At 4:02 a.m., I heard the chime again. Rapid, urgent. I sprinted to the door. The glass remained clear. I peered at my reflection in the window, and there behind me in the parking lot, I saw a figure crouching by the passenger door of my car. A woman, long hair matted, wearing a tattered sundress. She looked into the lot's glare, lips moving. Though no sound reached my ears, I spun back inside. My chest heaved. The chime rang once more. I bolted to the restroom door, yanked it open. The lights were on sinks, spotless. The mirror frame was tarnished brass in the shape of twisted vines. I shivered. The corners of the frame bore tiny etchings, faces screaming. My smile froze. Crack. A hairline fracture rippled across the mirror's surface. I stumbled back, darkness pooling at the edges of the glass. The reflected taps of my fingers against the counter slowed, then stopped. In the mirror, a hand reached out, pale, slender, pressing at the opposite side of the glass. The handprint smeared as though made of dust. Terror ripped through me. I spun, scanning the room. No one. I groped for the door handle. Locked. My breath came in short gasps. Behind me, a soft scraping, a finger tapping against the mirror's backside. Tap, tap, tap. Let me out, rasped a girl's voice, muffled, as if speaking through plastic. I recognized the voice, the woman at my car. I yanked at the handle, nothing. I slammed my shoulder against the door, no give. My reflection in the mirror went slack, lips parted in surprise. Then it smiled. My reflection smiled, wide, wicked teeth, too sharp. I staggered away, landing against the stall wall. My heart pounded. When I dared to look again, the mirror was intact, my reflection, my own once more. But in the shadow of the stall door, something moved. A pale arm dragging itself forward, the tattered sundress trailing behind. I lunged for the stall lock, threw it open, and grabbed the figure, dragged her into the stall. She lay on the floor, sobbing. I patted her back. "It's okay." I stopped. Her sobbing fell silent. I realized then that the floor beneath her was bone-white tile, and her legs vanished where they bent. Beneath the sundress, there was nothing but darkness. My skin crawled. I dropped to my knees beside her. She tilted her head, eyes still shadowed. "Thank you," she whispered, voice hollow, detached. I scrambled out and fumbled for my phone. No signal. The chime rang again. I rose, realizing the doors had relocked behind me. The girl's sobbing filled the small cubicle. She reached one hand through the bars, cold as frost, and brushed my cheek. "He's coming." Before there I could ask who the restroom lights winked out, I heard the stall lock click. Total darkness. I crawled backward, pressed my back to the far wall. The chime echoed in my ears, though the door was closed. In the black, I felt a presence approach, panting, soft, wet footsteps. Then a whisper at my ear. "Let me in." I screamed loud enough to shatter every silent promise of that station. Footsteps retreated. The lights flickered on. Silence. The girl was gone. The mirror whole. The door unlocked. I bolted out, ran through the aisles, threw off the open sign, and locked the door. I sat in my car, shaking until dawn painted the sky pink. When the manager came in bleary-eyed, I handed in my uniform, and Keys mumbled about family emergency and drove away. I never went back. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I see her reflection in any mirror I pass. Pale dress, hollow eyes, reaching hand, beckoning me back to Hugo's Gas and Go. I don't turn to look, but I feel her always just a reflection away. I thought my second job at Blackwood Shipping would be dull stacking pallets of plastic tubing in the cavernous storage hall from midnight to dawn. My name is Oscar, and I needed the cash. The warehouse was concrete and steel fluorescent tubes humming overhead forklift paths clearly marked. Security locked the heavy roll-up doors at 10 p.m. Nothing ever moved after that, until I found the footprints. My first few nights were uneventful. I logged each pallet, ran the scanner, and drank energy drinks to stay awake. On night 4, I was halfway through aisle C when I noticed something odd. A line of muddy footprints, small and narrow, running parallel to the stacked boxes. They were too small for a man, too large for a child's sneakers. No pattern of a typical sole. I frowned, crouched, and traced them back toward the loading dock. I followed the prints. They crossed the open floor, ducked behind crates, and led to a side door I'd never noticed before. Paint peeled around its frame, and a "Do Not Enter" sign hung loosely. The padlock was new and shiny. I stared at it. No key held it. I frowned. I shouldn't be here. I turned to leave, but a soft click alerted me the padlock had slid open. I froze. No wind, no breeze. I inched forward, heart pounding, and pushed the door. It opened on steel hinges with a tortured groan. Inside was an alcove, a narrow stairwell descending into blackness. I held my scanner's light to the steps. They were slick with moisture. Faint red piping ran along the wall. A weak fluorescent bulb at the bottom flickered, casting a dull glow on an underground service corridor I'd never been told existed. My pulse hammered. I should have left. Instead, I crept down. At the bottom, the concrete split into 2 hallways, one straight ahead, one to the right. The right one bore heavy chains at its end, fastened to a steel grate. The left one stretched into shadow. I heard a scraping sound from the left. I edged toward it. The corridor walls were chipped, stained years of neglect. I felt a draft, smelled damp earth. Then I saw it, in the beam of my scanner, a pair of glowing eyes low to the ground. They watched me from 20 feet away, unblinking. "Hello," I managed. No movement. The eyes blinked in unison, then vanished. Only the echo of my own breathing remained. I inched forward, scanning. The corridor opened onto a low ceiling room filled with crates marked "Defective, Do Not Ship." Among them lay dark stains on the floor, slick dried. My heart sank as I realized they were footprints too small. Curling toes pressed into the concrete. A soft chittering filled the air, like dozens of nails scraping tile. I whipped around the grate behind me, rattled. Something was on the other side, pushing at the bars. I rushed back, but the grate wouldn't budge. Every lock clamped shut. Behind me, the chittering grew louder. I turned my light to a crate corner and saw dozens of small bodies scattered across the floor. At first glance, broken bird skeletons, until I saw their jaws, hinged like rats' claws, like tiny hooks and elongated fingers. They stared at me with empty sockets. I stumbled back. The grate clanged as something heavy hit it from within. A single hand squeezed through the bars, pale and mottled fingernails long. It scratched the concrete, scraping toward me. Panic exploded. I sprinted back to the stairwell and bolted up the creatures, chittering echoing behind me. Flames of adrenaline propelled me to the alcove door. I yanked on the handle it gave. I slammed it shut on the last step, heart racing so hard it hurt. I fled through the warehouse aisles, ignoring every pallet, every scanner beep. The overhead lights flickered, but stayed on. I reached the exit door at 5:45 a.m. The first truck drivers were rolling in. I mashed the button, burst out into the yard, and collapsed against the cold metal of the lift gate. When the manager found me shaking, he handed me a bottle of water. I stammered, "There's something down there." He frowned. "There's no basement, Oscar. This place was built on a solid slab." "You sure you didn't imagine?" I pointed to the side door. The stairwell, the grate, the creatures. He followed my gaze. He saw the padlock still hanging open. He tried the door, it clicked. "That door's been sealed for years." My pulse soared. It was open. He glanced at his clipboard. "I'll have maintenance check it. Go home, Oscar." He turned to radio. I packed my bag that morning and never returned. Maintenance found no basement, no stairwell, and no hidden corridor. The side door was simply a blank wall now, but I have the footprints on my skin, the 7 scars on my calves, where tiny claws scraped me as I ran. And in my dreams, I still hear the chittering, see those pale eyes watching me from the darkness, waiting for me to come back. I never signed up to be hotel security, but I needed the extra hours and the steady paycheck. My name is Sarah, and for the past month, I've been the overnight receptionist and security monitor at the century-old Hotel Vanden, perched on the outskirts of Millstone. It's the kind of place with brass chandeliers, velvet drapes, and carpet so thick it muffles footsteps. The front desk's 24-hour camera feeds hallways, lobby service corridors were my only view of the building once the Do Not Disturb signs flipped on at 10:30 p.m. Most nights, it was dead quiet, until room 217 checked in. It was 11:40 p.m. when I saw the alert on my screen, a new keycard activation at the elevator room 217. Odd, because check-in hours end at 8:00 p.m. I opened the live feed and watched a tall man in a dark overcoat emerge from the elevator, face hidden beneath a fedora's brim. No luggage, no check-in record. He strode past the concierge desk and into the hall without so much as glancing at the cameras. I tapped the intercom. "Housekeeping, did you service 217? Silence. I called the front desk phone. "Evening, this is Sarah. Is there a Mr. No Name appeared on the system?" I frowned and pressed my headset mic, security, to main corridor. "Please investigate room 217. A static lull, then a faint click. I leaned forward to listen. Footsteps padded by the camera's view, then receded. I shrugged it off. Probably a staffer on a late shift errand. At 1:57 a.m., I checked the feed. Again, the man was in the hallway once more, walking slowly, head tilted, as though listening. The overhead sensors registered no personal card swipe, yet the cameras showed him passing every locked service door with impunity. My heart thumped as I watched him pause outside 213, 2 rooms down, smile beneath the fedora, then walk on. He stopped outside 217 and raised one gloved finger, tapping the brass room plate. The wood veneer warped and bulged outward beneath his touch like breathing. I gasped and pressed the emergency button on my console alert. The manager broadcast a lockdown, but the screen froze, then flickered, showing only static. Suddenly, the hallway lights went out. In the pitch-black view, the man remained visible, eyes pale slits shining in the darkness. He lifted a hand and beckoned. The corridor cameras glowed dimly, and I saw every room number warp and flicker as though printed on fragile glass. Behind him, I caught sight of movement, dozens of dark shapes swirling at the corridor's far end. Guests, staff, specters, they coalesced into blur of bodies with no faces mutely drifting toward him. A low hum filled my headphones. It was the hotel's antique elevator bell grinding to life, though the elevator was in maintenance. Ding, ding, ding. I fumbled for the intercom again. Housekeeping maintenance. We have an unauthorized. The feed snapped back to normal just as the lights returned. The corridor was empty. The man was gone. The service door to the stairwell remained firmly closed. I glanced at the register. No record of a check-in. No phone calls requesting a late arrival. Room 217 was vacant on the guest list. At 3:04 a.m., the main door chimed. I swiveled in my chair. A black car idled in the drive. The driver, a valet, wore a puzzled expression as he stared at a passenger's open-door empty seat. "Ma'am?" he called over the radio. "You seen this?" I swallowed and reached for the lobby feed. The lobby was empty again. No valet, no car, nothing but the carpeted drive and the pitch-black front doors. My pulse thundered. I checked every camera service corridors, basement rear loading dock. No sign of the man. At 4:27 a.m., I heard the faintest knock on the front desk counter. I jumped. No one should be there. I peered over the desk. Nothing. Then I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck. I spun around, but the reception lobby was empty. I fled to the staircase. Camera view. The digital feed showed the stairs descending into darkness. Then, halfway down, the man appeared. His fedora tilted forward, standing motionless. He raised a single finger to his lips. I bolted to the main corridor to room 217's door. My hands shook as I carried the master key. I tapped the lock 3 times. The door creaked open. Inside was the spotless room. A king bed, polished wood floor, drapes drawn tight. Nothing else. I stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind me. The lights flickered. In the mirror above the desk, I saw him materialize behind me. Fedora, overcoat, pale slits of eyes. I froze as he lifted a gloved hand and pointed to the bathroom door. I turned. The bathroom door was cracked. Slivers of pale tile visible. A long, thin hand reached through the gap, beckoning me. A soft tap, tap, tap. Like fingernails on bone. I inched forward. My reflection wavered in the vanity mirror beside the bathroom. The man's reflection loomed over me, though he stood several steps behind. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from the hotel owner. All guests accounted for. Enjoy your night. No mention of this man. I yanked the bathroom door open. Inside was only a clawfoot tub petals scattered across the floor and the porcelain sink. I let out a breath and backed out, knocked into the vanity. The mirror shattered spiderwebbing across my view, and in the largest shard I saw him smiling, fedora tipped at a jaunty angle, crimson-tipped fingers extended in invitation. I lost my footing, scrambled across the carpet, and jammed the door handle. It wouldn't latch. He appeared beside me, silent, looming through the broken mirror fragment. Kichiwai. I slammed my shoulder into him. It passed through as if he were smoke. He whispered in my ear, his voice a cold rasp. "Stay forever." I screamed and pounded the door. A click and it swung open. I bolted down the corridor, straight to the front desk, threw off my apron, and ran out into the cold dawn, not stopping until the town's welcome sign disappeared behind me. They still pay someone for security at Hotel Vanden. I don't know who. I don't know that man's name. But sometimes in my nightmares, I'm back at that broken mirror, and there behind the shard, I see his fedora, his pale eyes, and his crimson-tipped fingers beckoning, whispering, "Stay forever." I've spent the better part of a year cleaning floors that nobody walks on. My name is Henry, and I'm the overnight janitor at Redcroft High School. The echoes of my mop on the locker room tile and the squeak of my broom in the auditorium all belong to me from 11 p.m. to 5:30 a.m. It's a lonely shift, but I like the solitude. That is until I heard the music. That night began like any other. I clocked in at the custodian's office, grabbed my mop bucket and industrial cleaner, and started on the first floor. Classrooms stood silent chairs, stacked on desks, chalkboards scrawled with half-erased lessons. My radio crackled with static between songs, a comforting background hum. At 1:12 a.m., it switched suddenly, playing a tinny waltz, a music box melody that I didn't recognize. I frowned, turned up the volume. The speakers were hooked only to the principal's office. I was past that wing. I swept past the trophy case, and the melody followed me, soft, mournful, as if played underwater. I reached the end of the hall and peered down the second-floor corridor, empty. I muted the radio. Silence. I moved on. At 2:03 a.m., I parked my bucket outside the girls' locker room, scrubbing scuff marks off the tile. The waltz returned, drifting down the vent grills above. My heart thudded. I wiped my hands on my pants and opened the door. The locker room lay dark rows of metal lockers closed. Towels and damp gym clothes hung in the shower stall, swaying gently, though no breeze stirred. I flipped the lights on. The music stopped. I exhaled, relieved, and resumed cleaning. But at 2:27 a.m., while mopping the cafeteria, the speakers overhead erupted, with the same melody distorted, stretched out. I wiped the sudsy mop on the wall and glanced up at the ceiling tiles. The speaker grills vibrated subtly as though someone was tapping inside. I lifted a ceiling tile and found only insulation. I dropped it. The music cut off like someone yanking the power cord. Probably the AV Club testing equipment, I muttered, securing the tile and continuing my rounds. My steps echoed along the linoleum as I headed for the library. The library's enormous French doors stood open, faded mystery novels lining the shelves. I turned the lights on, and the waltz resumed, this time from the back corner where the old listening station lived. That station hadn't worked since the budget cuts last spring. I tensed, mouth dry, and approached. The disc player, an ancient relic, was spinning without a record on the turntable. Below, the amplifier's volume knob twisted of its own accord, cranking the music. I switched off the breaker in the fuse box. Silence. The lights flickered back on. My chest heaved. I needed to finish. The gym was next. The corridor stretched unnaturally long at 3:11 a.m., as though the building itself was expanding. My mop bucket felt heavy. I entered the gym. The polished floor lay marked with basketball court lines. I flipped the overhead lights, and again, the melody began. This time, faint, coming from the bleachers. I climbed the lowest row, heart banging. Beneath the seats, I found an old music box, the kind with a little ballerina figure. Its lid was open, the figurine rotating in a slow circle. No key wound it, yet the tiny tinkle played endlessly. I shut the lid. The melody stuttered, then stopped. I kicked the box under a seat. Dust motes danced in my flashlight beam. I fled the gym, leaving the lights on just in case. At 4:02 a.m., I collected my final trash bag in the science wing. The sound of dripping water led me to the sink area by Lab C. I bent to dry a puddle under the faucet, and the waltz began again, as though coming from inside the chemistry hood next to me. The glass cabinet doors rattled, chemicals clinked. My reflection in the glass warped and shifted. Behind me, I saw movement, faint like a girl in a billowy white dress turning away. I whipped my head around, nothing but the flickering fluorescence. I backed away, heart in my throat, and left the puddle to dry. I didn't care about a wet floor anymore. By 4:45 a.m., I'd swept the auditorium miles. The stage lights were off, but I turned them on anyway, illuminating dust clouds dancing above rows of chairs. I jiggled the stage curtains, and they parted, revealing a single empty seat on the stage, a small music box resting on it. The waltz, the same song played softly, impossibly distant. I stepped forward. The seat leaned back, as if someone had just vacated it. The music box was open. Ballerina. Pivoting porcelain face cracked. My breath turned shallow. I reached out to close it, but my hand passed through the ballerina, and I recoiled. The spotlights flickered. A hush fell. Then the soft sound of applause echoed across the empty seats. I jumped. There was no one there. My knees shook. I grabbed the music box and fled, leaving the auditorium in sudden darkness, only the echo of the last applause trailing behind me. At exactly 5:50 a.m., I'd finished swiping the last hall. The front office door was unlocked. I carried my mop and bucket, out adrenaline still coursing. I tossed my key card in the box and hurried to my car. That morning, I told the head custodian I'd found an old music box in the gym, decayed property. He said, his eyes distant, and he told me to scrap it. He didn't ask about the speakers or the desk in the auditorium. I kept silent. But at home, I unpacked my bag and found the music box from the auditorium, though I'd left it behind. Its lid was cracked and open. The ballerina turned slowly, and the melody began. I shut the lid. The song stopped. Then a single note played different dissonant a promise. I never returned to Redcroft High. But every night, right at 1:12 a.m. on the dot, I wake to the tune of a music box waltz playing through my bedroom door. And I know somewhere that janitor's work isn't done. I never imagined a single shift could shatter my grip on reality. My name is Miguel, and for the past year, I've worked the overnight toll booth on Route 47, a forgotten stretch of mountain road, famous for its hairpin turns and dense pines, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I sat alone in a glass enclosure 2 lanes wide, collecting fees from weary travelers. It was a quiet job, perfect for paying my rent and leaving me time to write my novel. But on November 2nd, the road claimed my ticket to normal life. I arrived at 9:50 p.m., punched in, and checked the intercoms. Both lanes' speakers crackled alive, and the fluorescent open sign glowed orange. I had the usual stock snack bars, energy drinks, brochures for the scenic overlook half a mile ahead. Traffic was light. A handful of cars trickled through between midnight and 3 a.m. Nothing unusual until 2 a.m. At 1:57, I counted a black sedan rolling up to lane 2. The driver's window slid open before the car even stopped. No headlights, just deep shadow. I peered over the counter. In the driver's seat sat a man, or something like a man. Pale skin, stretched tight over high cheekbones, eyes sunken so dark they were empty pits. He held out a crumpled dollar bill and whispered, voice raspy like wind through dead branches. 20, 30, 40. $40 toll, I said, lifting the laminated rate sheet. My words felt loud in the still overnight air. He nodded once, expressionless, and pushed the bill through the slot. I retrieved change and passed it back. His hand was ice against mine. Have a safe trip, I said, forcing a smile. He stared at me a moment, then closed the window and rolled forward. The engine never started yet. The car glided away into the blackness as though pulled by unseen rails. As it passed my booth's open side window, I caught a whiff of something rotten. Old blood pine needles decay. My skin prickled. I shook it off. Route 47 had its legends, ghost cars, hitchhikers vanished on the pass, but I'd always laughed them off. This must have been a prankster in makeup. At 3:22 a.m., the night had grown colder. Frost glazed the windshield. I sipped lukewarm coffee and doodled in my notebook, plotting my next chapter. The booth's clock ticked over to 3:33. Right on cue, the speakers crackled. A distant car horn echoed like a hornet trapped under glass. I looked up to see the black sedan. Again, idling in lane 1, this time headlights dead, but cabin illuminated in pale moonlight. The window clicked open. The driver wore the same blank expression. His fingers extended, drumming on the door frame, not counting change, rhythmic tap. Tap, tap. I swallowed. Toll's $50 tonight. His head tilted, and though he never blinked, I felt him study me. He removed a battered metal badge from his coat, shining official looking, and held it to the window. The badge bore a seal I didn't recognize, an eagle with outstretched wings draped over a skull. His lips curled upward in a mockery of a grin. Valid, I asked. He tapped 3 times on the badge. Tap, tap, tap. A sudden chill swept the booth. The neon open sign above the window sputtered, then went dark. Panic surged. My breath fogged in the icy air inside the heated booth. I reached for the radio. No response. I flicked the light's fuse blown. The only glow came from the wood-burning stove we used in winter. Its door was closed cold. The driver leaned forward, pressing the badge against the glass. I saw my own reflection behind him, but my face was gaunt, eyes hollow. The reflection's mouth opened without sound. I tore my gaze away, heart pounding. I fumbled for my cell phone dead. I pried open the change drawer and dumped every coin into my palm, then set the badge aside and passed the coins through the slot. The driver's fingers closed around the change, but his hand remained pressed against the glass. I backed away as he yanked on the coins, pulling so hard the drawer rattled. I hopped back and crashed into the chair, knocking it over. The driver let out a dry, rasping laugh that echoed in my skull. The engine never revved yet. The car lurched forward, then reversed with a low groan. He peered back at me, eyes shining in the lamplight, and the entire sedan seemed to stretch and warp doors, elongating roof expanding, until the vehicle looked like a twisted toy. He tapped again, harder. Tap, oh, tap, tap. I covered my ears. Screeching filled the booth like metal on metal. The glass cracked in a spiderweb pattern, then shattered outward. But no shards fell. An invisible barrier held them like an unbroken film. I screamed and scrambled out the hatch at the back of the booth, landing in freezing gravel. The wind howled down the pass. I looked back through the remaining cracks in the window, just in time to see the driver's badge sliding off the dashboard as though pushed by an unseen finger. It clattered to the floor. Then the car wasn't there. I staggered to my feet, heart thundering. Frosted breath rose before me. The booth lights snapped on fluorescent tubes, flickered back to life. The open sign glowed once more. The front lanes were empty, wobbling between safety pylons. The toll arm on lane 2 was up. My blood ran cold. I glanced at the schedule taped to the wall. Booth should be unmanned. 4 a.m., 5 a.m. for janitor shift. Someone else was supposed to cover this slot. Except no relief ever came. My radio crackled only static. I sprinted to the nearby guard shack, abandoned for years, hoping to find a phone or a clue. The door was unlocked, inviting. Inside lay a dusty desk, yellowed papers, a single sheet marked in bold, Route 47 toll booth. Safety protocol. Do not interact with unofficial badges. I stared at the page. At the bottom, scrawled in shaky handwriting, badge number 47. Do not let him pass. I dropped the paper as the wind groaned outside. I looked up to see the black sedan idling beyond the shack window, headlights still off. Its door swung open on creaking hinges, yet no one stepped out. I bolted back to my booth, grabbed my belongings, and fled down the mountain road on foot, guided only by the dim glow of my phone's flashlight. I made it to the highway entrance by dawn. A patrol car waited. The officer jumped when he saw me disheveled and speechless. I tried to tell him, badge, skull, Route 47, but collapsed into the back seat. They took me to the station, declared me hypothermic and traumatized by a prank. No driver, no car found. They checked the booth. No badge, no coins, no broken glass. Only my footprints in the gravel and the plaster cast of the cracked window remained. I quit that night. I never returned. But on cold nights, when the moon is low and the wind howls through my apartment, I hear 3 taps on the window pane tap. Tap, tap, and I know he's still out there somewhere on Route 47, waiting to collect his toll. I never thought a dusty book could upend my life. My name is Lydia, and for the past 2 years, I've been the overnight librarian at Hawthorne Public Library, a stone building with arched windows, thick oak shelves, and a vault of rare manuscripts locked behind glass. My shift ran from 10:00 p.m. to 6:00 a.m., with only the faint hum of the HVAC and the distant drip of the fountain in the reading garden to break the silence. I adored the solitude. That is, until I found the unbound tome. It began on a rainy Tuesday in late May. I stayed late shelving returned books, a therapy of order in a chaotic world. At 1:37 a.m., I noticed a slip of parchment tucked between the pages of an 1892 edition of Poe's Tales. The slip read, "Check the locked cabinet at the stroke of 2. No call number, no signature, just the scrawled instruction." My pulse fluttered. The rare books cabinet sat in the back, alarmed and bolted. Only I had the key. I shrugged, assuming a student's prank, and discarded the slip. I finished shelving and polished the counters, watching the hourly chimes creep from 1:50 to 2:00 a.m. When the clock on the wall chimed twice, a sharp ding-dong, I felt a tug at my sleeve, though no one stood behind me. The library fell deathly quiet. I pocketed my phone and eased toward the locked cabinet, heart ticking in sync with my footsteps. I unlocked the bronze latch. The sensor beeped a silent warning, but I ignored it and flipped open the door. Inside lay no bound volumes, only a single unbound manuscript, parchment pages yellowed at the edges, lying in perfect alignment. I gingerly lifted the top leaf and read the title in faded calligraphy, "The Ledger of Forgotten Fates." My breath hitched. I'd never heard of it. Compelled, I carried the pages to the librarian's desk and arranged them in order. The parchment crackled under my fingers. I turned to the first page. It listed my name, my birth date, and a single line, "The watchman sees, but cannot warn." My heart pounded. I dropped the page. Behind me, the lights flickered, and I swear I heard the faint turning of book pages in the stacks. I forced myself to resume. Page 2 bore my roommate's name, her date of birth, and beneath it, "Silence is her solace." My hands trembled. I snapped the page shut. The lights pulsed. The fountain beyond the window stilled mid-drip. A low groan echoed in the stacks, and I caught sight of a shadow flitting between the aisles, too tall to be a person, thin and elongating. I flipped to page 3. It named the mayor of our town, followed by, "He carries secrets that will drown the dawn." My breath came in short gasps. The walls seemed to lean in. I slammed the pages together, ready to replace them in the cabinet. A crisp breeze stirred the pages. Impossible. No windows were open. I looked up to see an open doorway at the far end where the staff-only door should have been closed. Through the gap, I glimpsed a narrow hallway veiled in darkness. From it came a soft whisper, "Find the rest." I backed away, but a single page slid to the floor, the next in sequence. I bent to pick it up. The ink had changed it, now bore my own name again, followed by a date less than a week away, and a final line by then, "There will be no librarian." I screamed and shoved the pages back into the cabinet, slammed the door and locked it. The alarm buzzed, but the system gave no alert. The whisper rose to a frantic chorus, echoing through the shelves. "Find the rest." I fled the rare books room, heedless of the silent books snapping shut behind me like coffin lids. I bolted to the front desk, heart racing. I scanned the main reading room, empty. I called the security intercom. "This is Lydia. There's an intruder in the rare books room." but static hissed over the speaker. At 3:12 a.m., I turned to see the shadowy figure sliding through the doorway behind me. It moved with impossible slowness, arms outstretched, ink-smeared fingers brushing the spines. I recognized the form of a man in a bowler hat, though the hat's brim seemed to bleed darkness onto the shelves. No face showed, only a swirl of ink where his features should be. I dashed for the exit, but the front doors were resolutely locked. Panic clawed at my throat. The figure's whisper followed me. The ledger? Complete the ledger. I lunged for the public computer to call 911, but the screens flickered maps of the library corridors, turning into maps of my nightmares, twisting loops with no escape. I backed away and spotted the back exit, a heavy service door. I sprinted for it. The librarian's office key sat on my desk, forgotten in my panic. I snatched it and unlocked the door. The figure glided closer. Each step sent a hush through the library, as though words fled the air. I crashed through the service door and ran across the loading dock into the drizzling night. I didn't stop until the library's lights were a distant glow. I collapsed on the curb, drenched in sweat and rain. At dawn, they found me. The director asked calm questions. Did you lock the cabinet? Did you lose the manuscript? I shook my head, too shaken to speak. Maintenance searched the rare books room. No cabinet breach, no ledger pages, nothing but a faint smell of old ink. I quit that afternoon, leaving behind my key and my pride. Now at home, I see pages drifting in my dreams, the ledger's incantations. And at 2:00 a.m. each night, I wake to the soft chanting of ink scratching on parchment complete. The ledger. I can't escape the words. And I fear that if I don't return, if I don't find the rest of that cursed tome by that date in the ledger, there truly will be no librarian left. I never thought answering phones could be dangerous. My name is Grace, and I work the graveyard shift at Meridian Utilities Customer Service Hotline, 10:00 p.m. to 6:00 a.m., answering outage reports, billing inquiries, occasional prank calls. The call center was a fluorescent-lit bunker in the basement of a downtown high-rise, monitors humming headsets, clicking a row of cubicles stretching into shadow. It was mind-numbing work, but safer than my last job. Until the night I took a call that shouldn't have come through. It was April 12th, 2:47 a.m., when my headset crackled to life with a shaky breath. The screen popped up with an unidentified number, flagged restricted. I clicked answer. "Hello," I said, voice polite.
Grace.
The caller's voice was low guttural, as though filtered through a metal tube. My stomach clenched at how it knew my name. "Yes, this is Grace. How can I help you?" Static crackled. "They're coming." My fingers froze on the keyboard. I'm sorry." A maniacal chuckle. "You can't stop them." I glanced at the wall clock, 2:49 a.m. My pulse throbbed in my temples. "Sir?" "I'm not sure what you mean." "This is the utilities line." He hissed. "They want power. They want light." The line sputtered and went dead. My screen still showed the call. Active, no hold time, no disconnection. I pressed end. The timer rolled 03:04:12, 03:04:13. My heart raced. I punched in another code to disconnect forcibly. Nothing. The headset clicked, but the call lingered. I yanked off the headset and tossed it aside. The supervisor's light blinked on my panel. "Grace, everything all right?" she asked. Just a weird glitch." I fumbled for my pen. I'll log it in the ticket. She didn't press. I described a dropped call. She nodded and turned away. I watched the call timer climb, still ringing, still active. At 3:12 a.m., the phone rang again, this time on my backup headset. I answered automatically. Grace. The same metallic voice. They're here. My breath caught. Who's here? A mechanical scraping filled the line like steel wheels on rails. My cubicle walls shook. The overhead lights buzzed, then dimmed, plunging the center into half light. Monitors flickered. I glanced around. Rows of headsets hung idle agents frozen in mid-typing screens locked in static. The scraping grew louder, reverberating beneath the room. Grace, open the door. I whipped around. My cubicle door stood closed. The walls should have enclosed me. I heard something skitter across the linoleum floor behind me. Tiny footsteps echoing in the silence. I spun and caught a glimpse of a pale figure slipping between cubicles, 2 rows over tall, gaunt limbs, unnaturally long. I slammed my palm on the headset's mute button. The voice continued. Don't hide, Grace. We need the light. I yanked off the headset. Desperation clawed at me. I jumped out of my chair and sprinted toward the exit door. Only it was gone, replaced by a blank panel. Panic flared. I pounded the blank where the door should be. Help, I screamed. No one moved. The scrabbling from behind grew frantic. Hundreds of little claws tapping on tile. The pale figure emerged into the dim glow eyes, black hollows, mouth, a ragged slit skin stretched tight. Behind it, dozens more pressed between cubicle slits, their bodies twisted, mouths opening in silent howls. I ran back to my station, ripping at the headset wiring until it snapped. The voice rang clear in my head. Turn on the light. I looked up. One overhead fixture flickered. I lunged for the breaker panel on the wall, a small metal box with circuit toggles, but it was padlocked. I yanked it free and flipped the switch. The room plunged into darkness. Silence reigned until dozens of tiny footsteps pounded around me. My cubicle phone rang again, the single line piercing the gloom. I stared at it. I had no choice. I picked up. Hello. Silence. Then soft breathing. Then the wheezing voice. Now. At that moment, every monitor powered on at once, bathing the room in ghostly blue light. I stared as dozens of security camera feeds flickered across screens, the service corridor, the copy room, the empty break area, and in each, a pale figure stood in the shadows, staring directly at the camera. In the lobby feed, I saw them pressing faces to the glass exit doors. The monitors went dark again, then rebooted, showing my own cubicle from the ceiling camera lens pointed down. I saw myself, panic-stricken caller turned fists clenched. Open the door. Grace hissed the voice through the phone. I backed away until my shoulders hit the desk. The cubicle walls felt like walls no longer, more like thin curtains I could pass through. I swallowed hard. I realized then I'd have to walk through them to safety. I taped the phone to my ear and stepped toward the boundary of my workspace. The floor crackled beneath me. The pale figures pressed closer beyond the walls. Their whispers, a chorus of hissing breaths, filled my mind. Light, open, light. I gripped the edge of the cubicle wall fabric and pulled, finding instead a solid, cold metal surface. My vision blurred as the figures pressed their faces against it, their breath misting the divider. The phone glowed in my hand. I pressed it to my ear. The line crackled now. I pressed my palm flat and leaned forward. The metal was cold slick. I pressed harder, and the wall wavered, folding inward like a curtain in the wind. I slipped through. I emerged into the lobby corridor, bright, humming with fluorescent lights. No sign of the others. The exit doors glowed open. I burst through into the night air, gasping as though surfacing from deep water. Behind me, through the glass, I saw them, dozens of pale faces pressed to the insides of the doors, mouths open in silent screams, eyes hollow. They tapped on the glass in rhythm, tap, tap, tap. I ran until the building was out of sight. I called in, "I'm quitting." The supervisor sounded annoyed, but accepted it. I got my things and never looked back. Now, sometimes I feel someone breathing on my shoulder when I'm alone, and at exactly 2:47 a.m., my phone rings with a restricted caller ID. If I answer, I hear only someone whispering grace. Open the door. I hang up and hide the phone under my bed. But I know they're still waiting on the other side of those walls, waiting for the lights to go out again. I never expected a routine call could become a nightmare. My name is Ray, and I drive the overnight ambulance shift for Carter County EMS 8:00 p.m. to 8:00 a.m., responding to accidents, cardiac arrests, the occasional drunken brawl. I've seen death up close, wrapped in blankets and strapped to stretchers. But nothing prepared me for what climbed into my rig at 3:16 a.m. That night started normally dispatch, sent me to a minor fender bender on Highway 52. 2 cars, a handful of scrapes. No injuries, just paperwork. I returned to the station at 1:45 a.m. for a quick break, coffee, and restock. At 3:02 a.m., the pager lit up Priority 2, Unknown Medical. Location Old Pine Road, Mile 3. I grabbed my kit and headed out. Old Pine Road curved through dense woods, 2 lanes only shoulder crumbling. I turned the siren on and raced there, arriving at 3:12 a.m. No crash, no flashing police. Just a single house, dark peeling paint, overgrown lawn, porch light dim. I parked behind the ambulance, stepped out, and saw an elderly man waving me in. He resembled a war vet, gray buzz cut, creased cheeks, but his eyes were too bright, too focused. "Thank God you're here," he rasped. "My wife. She's been hurt." I followed him to the porch and into a cluttered living room. The dim light revealed decades of dust. He led me to a closed bedroom door. "Please, hurry." I braced the door and pushed inside. The bed lay rumpled, no signs of disturbance. I scanned the room. No victim. Then I heard a soft weeping from under the bed. I knelt and peered beneath. Nothing but shadows. I shone my flashlight, rat droppings, discarded tissues, and a woman's hand, pale and bloody, reluctant to move. I gasped and extended my gloved hand. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her eyes blinked, glazed and unfocused, but she nodded. I signaled my partner on the radio. Got 1 coding. Urgent. Behind me, the old man's face sank into rictus grin. "She's been waiting," he whispered. "Wanted you." I lifted the woman onto the stretcher, careful of her injuries, deep lacerations across her side, tattered nightgown stained red. As I secured her, the man's breathing fastened. "She's mine," he murmured. I closed the door and handed him a sheet to sign. He did so with a shaking hand, though no pen was in sight. I pressed the pager button en route to County Hospital. I strapped in the patient and climbed into the driver's seat. My partner sat up front, preparing vitals. The old man rose from the porch, though I insisted he join us as well. I opened the back doors. "Sir, please get in. We need his info." He stepped in behind me. The doors shut. My partner started the rig. As we pulled onto the road, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The man stood rigid behind the stretcher, though I'd locked the doors to keep him in. His eyes widened, as though he saw something in the back. He pointed. "She's escaping." I yanked the rearview mirror down and looked into the cargo area empty space where the patient had been. My heart froze. The stretcher lay bare, bloodstained, but empty. No woman, no man. I slammed on the brakes. The wheels screeched. My partner spun around. "What?" The old man pressed his face to the glass, eyes dark voids. He pounded the divider. "Damn it. Bring her back." I fumbled the radio. "Dispatch, we require immediate assistance. We have a static." No response. Behind us, the ambulance engine died, coasting to a stop in the middle of the road. My partner and I jumped out into the cold air. The road lay empty. No sirens, no other vehicles. We ran around to the back doors locked. I turned the handle, no give. I kicked at the doors. They shook, but remained closed. I heard a shuffling inside, as though fabric brushing across metal. Then a soft thump, as though someone sat on the stretcher. My partner grabbed my arm. "We need to open it." I yanked the release lever. The doors swung open. Empty. Not a trace of the woman or the man. The stretcher's straps were undone. A single scrap of fabric fluttered in the breeze, a piece of nightgown, tattered and clotted. We stared at each other. "What the hell?" my partner muttered. I picked up the scrap, cold, sticky. That's when I heard her voice, soft behind me. "Help me." I whirled. No one. Just the dark road stretching into the pines. The temperature dropped, breath visible in the air. I spun around, nothing but my own reflection in the ambulance's side window. I stumbled back to the cab. We climbed in, doors locked. The engine turned over. My partner swallowed and glanced at me. I nodded, and we drove back to the station in tense silence. When we reported the incident, the dispatcher frowned. "No calls from Old Pine Road tonight. No reports of missing persons. Our captain ordered a tow and an inspection, nothing unusual. No patient, no witness. No old man. No pact for reason." Now, I see her, sometimes, haunting the edges of my dreams. A whisper in the dark. They took me away, and I wonder if when an ambulance stops at a house where it shouldn't, something unwanted catches a ride. Because on Old Pine Road, mile 3, they still hear the sirens' callers vanish, calls drop, and every midnight a phantom paramedic hears a voice plead, "Help me." I never thought I'd regret working weekends at the Sunrise Motel. But after what happened, I realized some jobs are never routine. My name is Dana, and as the overnight clerk, I manage reservations, midnight check-ins, and the occasional late-night cleaning. The motel was a 2-story rectangle around a central courtyard with a dying fountain. The neon sign buzzed incessantly, "Vacancy." My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., quiet, predictable, until the night the assistant woke. It was August 8th, 3:32 a.m. when the phone rang. The caller ID read assistant, I answered with practiced cheer. "Good evening. Sunrise Motel, this is Dana." Silence. Then, in a clipped mechanical tone, "Report to room 5. My pulse quickened. Room 5 was right above the office, long overdue for deep cleaning, supposedly closed for repairs. Maintenance had posted a sign, "Do not enter." "Sorry," I said. "That room is out of service. Report to room 5. The line disconnected. I stared at the handset. The front desk computer pinged a new message from system admin. The subject line, "Assistant room 5. Then nothing, no body, no text. I exhaled and shrugged. Probably a prank by the night auditor. I jingled my keys and climbed the stairs. The carpet was faded threadbare. I passed rooms 4 and 6 doors closed, silent, then stood before room 5. The maintenance sign still hung crooked. I thumbed the latch unlocked. I hesitated, then pushed it open. The room lay dark save for the glow of the neon vacancy sign outside filtering through the curtains. The air smelled of must and bleach. The bed was made, but the sheets were crisply starched as though freshly laundered. The TV was on volume, low static hissing. I flicked the light switch, nothing. I fumbled for my phone flashlight and swept the room. The dresser drawer stood open. Clothes I didn't recognize were folded and stacked inside. A vintage rotary phone sat on the nightstand receiver off the hook. I raised the handset. Click. The clipped voice crackled. "Check the mirror." My stomach sank. I approached the wall-length mirror above the desk. My reflection stared back, pale wide-eyed. I leaned closer. Behind me, in the mirror's reflection, something moved. I spun. Empty room. I turned back to the mirror. Now standing beside me, almost behind my reflection, was a figure, tall, skeletal, wearing a gray uniform and peaked cap. Its face was obscured by shadow. I yanked back. The figure remained in the reflection, still silent. I looked up, no one in the room. I backed toward the door. The voice whispered through the handset, "Enter the closet." My legs nearly gave way. I stepped toward the open wardrobe. Inside was a row of hangers, and at the back, a small wooden box sitting on the floor. I knelt and picked it up. Its surface was etched with a chipped motel logo and the words, "Guest Book." I pried it open. Inside lay yellowed pages, names inked in spidery script, some dating to the 1960s. I flipped through names I didn't recognize until I saw one that made my blood run cold. Amanda Renforth, 10/8/1972. Checked in 3 a.m., left 5 a.m. Beneath it, scribbled in fresh ink, "I never left. AR." My heart pounded. The mirror behind me showed the reflection of the box, and in its gleam, I saw the figure stepping forward, fainter than smoke. I slammed the box shut. My breath echoed in my throat. The TV clicked on flickering images of empty room 5. Shot from the bathroom camera, the closet, the corner by the bed. Then a title card. "Check out, time 5 a.m. I flung the phone aside. The reflection figure's cap tipped, revealing a pair of hollow eye sockets. I backed into the hallway, slamming the door behind me. The maintenance sign fell. I tore down the stairs and raced behind the front desk. The phone rang again, my headset's line. I answered Dana, speaking no voice, just the whirring of the TV behind the desk. I spun on the lobby monitor. Room 5's feed glowed the mirror view, but empty. Then the reflection of the skeletal attendant appeared leaning into the lens and smiled. I dropped the receiver and sprinted out into the courtyard. The fountain gurgled. Room 5's window curtains parted, then closed. I froze. A clack sounded high heel on concrete, and I turned to see the figure at the top of the stairs, cap in hand, beckoning. I bolted for my car, leapt in, and locked the doors. The lobby's neon sign buzzed as I gunned the engine. As I sped away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. In the window of room 5, behind the curtains, a pale face watched me go. They say the Sunrise Motel was built on the grounds of an old hospital annex, where a nurse named Amanda Renforth vanished in 1972. They never found her body. Rumor is she haunts room 5, the motel's assistant, guiding late-night guests between life and death. I turned in my keycard that morning, but sometimes when I reach for the phone at home, it rings caller ID assistant. And if I answer, I hear only one word: check out. I hang up. But I know somewhere someone else will answer and spend their nights learning the price of an unfriendly check-in. I should have worked maintenance on that old hospital tower. My name is Caleb, and for 3 weeks, I've been tasked with refurbishing the freight elevator at St. Agnes Asylum, shuttered for decades, slated for demolition. My job was simple: grease the rails, replace cables, ensure the doors closed smoothly. I'd done it in haunted ladies' colleges and old factories, but this tower's elevator took me somewhere I could never return from. I arrived at 11:30 p.m. on the first night. The tower's entrance was blocked by caution tape. I ducked under, lit only by my headlamp. The elevator doors, once painted red, were rusted shut. I pried them open with a wrench. Inside the car, hung level with the ground floor dust, thick cables slack. I tethered myself to the rail above and dropped in. The doors groaned closed behind me. I pressed the call button for the basement. The flickering bulb overhead pulsed on 4. The indicator read 4. I pulled the lever. The car shuddered, then descended smoothly. 3, 2, 1. Vision? B2. Not basement B2. A floor never on any blueprint. The doors creaked open, revealing a long corridor lit by a single bare bulb at each end. The walls were lined with peeling wallpaper, once hospital green, now mottled mold. Wheelchairs sat abandoned in alcoves. I swallowed hard. Not here for corridor work. I'd signed up for basement mechanical rooms, furnaces, pipes. I stepped out, lantern in hand, and the elevator doors hissed shut behind me. The lever flicked back to the off position. I was stuck. I forced myself forward. The corridor stretched farther than any asylum floor I'd seen, endless, echoing each footstep. I passed doors all numbered beneath chipped plates: B201, B202, up to B213, and beyond B227, B242, until B2666. I froze at B213. The door was ajar. Yellow light spilled out. I moved closer. Through the gap, I saw bunks and bedside tables, an entire ward. Photos of stern doctors smiled from the walls. A long row of gurneys stood empty, each with a patient journal. I picked one: patient Jane Doe. Condition complacent. Status observed. All the pages were blank. I backed away and walked on. A low moan drifted from down the corridor. I followed it until I reached B242. The door rattled, and inside I saw a girl huddled in the corner, rocking. Her hospital gown was frayed, her face hidden by tangled hair. I called softly, "Hey, are you okay?" She looked up, pale skin, sunken eyes, mouth torn in a grin. She whispered, "I can't leave." Then she crawled on all fours toward me with unnatural speed. I stumbled back, heart hammering, and she vanished through the ward wall as though it were mist. I pressed onward, stumbling at B2 103. The hallway ended in a mirror. My reflection stared back, but I was older, my hair grayer. Behind me, in the mirror, I saw the girl standing with the skeletal doctor, a thin man in a stained lab coat, eyes vacant. He reached out, touching her shoulder. She turned, mouth opening in a silent scream. I spun around. The corridor was empty. I pounded my fist against the glass. No passage. My reflection remained, but my mirrored self looked at me with pity. I fled back the way I came. Past B242, past B213, until I reached the elevator doors. I pressed the call button. Nothing. I kicked them open and climbed in. The lever was stuck on off. I yanked it down. 1, 2, 3. The indicator blinked B2. I held the lever at random. The car lurched upward, 27, 18, 9, then stopped at L. There was no L on the panel. The doors slid open onto a rooftop sky, starless black. I stepped out onto a narrow ledge. Below me, nothing but darkness. I held the railing and inched forward, searching for stairs, a ladder, anything. My boots slipped. I nearly fell but caught myself. My breathing turned ragged. I looked up past the edge over the skyline of the asylum's main wing. No city lights, only the hospital's silhouette and a pale moon. Then I heard it, the emergency bell from inside the asylum, faint tinny ringing in the night, though no clock struck the hour. I scampered back to the elevator. The doors remained open. I jammed the lever back to off, then flicked it to 4, the known 4th floor. The car shook violently, groaning. The doors closed. It rocketed upward. 3, 2, 1, G1, 2, 3, 4. The indicator halted on 4. The elevator slowed to a stop. The doors opened into the main hallway of the old hospital wing lights, blazing modern signage guiding visitors. An orderly pushed a patient bed past, startled to see me. "You're not cleared for this area," he said kindly. "Need assistance?" I managed a nod. "Maintenance. Elevator." My voice trembled. He frowned, glancing at the empty gurney. "That elevator's been decommissioned since last month." I closed the doors and backed away. The hallway was bright familiar. The freight elevator entrance bore a bold red sign, "Out of service." I pressed my ear to the door. No hum of machinery, only silence. I slipped into a maintenance closet and found a set of stair access keys. I crept down 4 flights until I reached the tower's ground floor. The main doors were open. I slipped out into the night. Now, some nights when I lie in bed, I dream of that elevator's endless floors. B213, B242, B2666, and beyond into the void. I hear the girls whisper, "I can't leave." I feel the skeletal doctor's gaze on me, and sometimes, right at 3:16 a.m., the freight elevator bell rings faintly in my dreams, summoning me back to where no living soul belongs. I never returned. But I know St. Agnes's elevator still waits ready to descend into the asylum's forgotten depths, and I wonder who will be foolish enough to ride it next.